Hello, and welcome to another in our series of Advising Brown Bags. Today, we're very pleased to have Dr. Susan Davenport with us. She is the Interim Provost and Executive Vice President at Stockton, along with Richard Trauma, who is the Assistant Director of Academic Advising. Dr. Davenport will discuss connecting a liberal education with academic advising. And Rich is on hand to talk about our liberal studies degree at Stockton, which has undergone a makeover in recent years. Dr. Davenport has always been Dr. Davenport has always been involved with advising at some level, either as an advising practitioner or managing units that provide academic advising services. Immediately before coming to Stockton, she was Dean and Associate Provost at Graduate Programs at Thomas Edison State College in the Haven School of Arts and Sciences, where the focus was on an interdisciplinary approach to lifelong adult learning. At Stockton, we can find her in a virtual classroom as she teaches the course Introduction to Liberal Studies. Again, thank you to both of you for presenting today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paula. It's great to be here. As I was saying, you're all experts in this room, so we're just have a little conversation here about the importance of advising and precepting and what it means to be able to work at this wonderful place that values a liberal education and how we can sell that to some degree or have students understand the value of a liberal education within their degrees. As Paula said, I've been advising for a long time. I actually probably should have known that I wanted to be an advisor because I love college catalogs and bulletins, and was so exciting to me as a high school student to receive them in the mail. I would read them all cover to cover, and I think everyone should. But everybody looks at me like you're looking right now and thinks that that's crazy. I have this great idea to have that every employee should have to have a catalog quiz before they can get their first paycheck, because I just think it's so important. We tell our students that they should read the bulletin, but oftentimes we have not read it. So you're not looking at me quite crazy, so maybe we'll pursue that. Paula asked me to speak today after I had given a little, just came and visited with the Advising Center and talked a little bit about my background and what we're doing in our Intro to Liberal Studies course, and she thought it might be interesting for all of you. I have been advising for my whole career, really, and because I feel like once you're an advisor, you're always one. I can't kind of let it go. I find people without degrees, and there's a few people around Stockton who I'm trying to help out, because I think that finding the pathway to a degree is such a transformative experience. It's more than just checking off the boxes on a sheet. It's really helping people find their future and find the value in our education. So it's really quite meaningful to me to continue to do that. So I was an advisor at Pace University, which is a similar institution to Stockton, except that it's in Manhattan, and really learned a lot about advising there and about how you help people put the puzzle pieces together. And then when I went to Thomas Edison, I went there as an advisor and then moved up the ranks. But really what I loved about it was helping students find the connections in all of the different learning that they had done to date. So we talk about lifelong learning, but really that was for me an education and showing students they would be embarrassed sometimes by their transcripts or not feel proud of the work that they had done, but they had learned, and to show them that there was value in that learning and how they could build on it was really, like I said, transformative, and helped me when I started developing curriculum and working as a dean to see that it's really important to the students for there to be meaning in their degree programs, and so they can understand how those pieces fit together. Oftentimes you'll hear your preceptees say, I'm sure, I just want to get this out of the way. I just want to get my general education or my H attribute out of the way. And I think helping them find the connections that it's going to make a difference to them is really important. In the course Intro to Liberal Studies that Peter and I put together, we start with the history of a liberal education, and I really like it because it shows going back to the Greeks and in Seneca and probably before that, we were talking about training versus education, not a new argument about whether or not a business degree versus a liberal arts degree has any value. It really goes all the way back there. And I remember when I was in my own doctoral program learning about the Yale Report of 1828, I get very geeky about that, but we have the students read that as well, and that's talking about the same thing. How do we make, in the for the 19th century, how do we make an education relevant to our undergraduate students? And even then, students didn't write well, and they didn't like to read, and professors would lament about their, how awful it was to have students who weren't engaged in their education, and how could they make them more engaged. And I find that the students, although they find the material a little dense, they really they enjoy knowing that this has been a long argument. This isn't something that just happened in the latest recession, but this is something that we've been building on for quite some time. But we really start to hit our stride when we talk about the value of an education, and talking about why they chose what they chose to come to Stockton. What does that mean? They could have gone anywhere, but they came to Stockton, so what does that mean for them? And how do the things like our essential learning outcomes, how do they mesh with their degree requirements? Many students focus so much on their major and not enough on the whole degree in and of itself. And I just feel like the major is just a pathway. It's just showing you can study something in depth, but it's not necessarily your career. And helping students decouple that, helping them give them the language for their parents to decouple that, I think is just a real gift to them, that they can see that, employers are not necessarily looking for somebody who knows the latest business trends, although that's nice. But they want you to be able to work in a team. They want you to be able to adapt to change, and to know about careers that haven't even existed yet. I spent the majority of my career learning about online learning that didn't even really exist at all. When I went to Thomas Edison, we were still mailing things back and forth. It was all correspondence, and there was maybe 5 or 6 online courses, and that was just not a discussion at all. So it wouldn't be something I could have prepared for, or even knew I had an affinity for. So I think that helping students realize that there are careers out there that we know nothing about, that they need to know how to get the knowledge, how to be successful, how to work together as a team and do that research. That's what they're really striving for as part of the Stockton degree. Now, some things you can't do without having a particular major. It'd be hard to be an accountant if you didn't take any accounting courses, I suppose. But I think many of the things, I often have students look in the want ads and see what are they looking for. Do they say you need to have a degree in X, or do they say you need to have a degree in the appropriate skills? So I think some of the things that we can do as preceptors is help students make those connections. Talk to them, the technology is pretty good. You can have a CAP audit that will show you, if your courses meet your requirements. And my younger son, I have 2, and the younger one just graduated, and I have to say I was a little obsessed with his CAP audit. I was one of those horrible helicopter parents who would run his CAP audit after he registered and make sure everything went where it was supposed to go. And I was terrible because I made a big, huge mistake on it and almost messed up his graduation. And he doesn't mind. He seemed to take it in stride, but it was so terrible because I should not have been in it at all. But what I loved about it was showing that, this all has some meaning to you. Let's make sure that it was always about, you're not going to waste time. Make sure the courses meet the requirements. And I think that's really important. The technology does that, but what we can provide that the technology can't is the meaning behind it. So what history attribute makes sense if I am a socianth major versus if I am a business major, and how do I pick that beyond just going to rate my professors or looking at the time of day that fits into my schedule. And I think those things are important too, because our students are really busy. Teaching online students, we have a lot of personal sharing that goes on within the course, and students actually love to do that, and they feel, I think, pretty safe within an online environment. So they have all sorts of things going on. A lot of them working full time, and they'll say, this week the question is, do you think you can create a community of learners online? And they're very passionate about, of course we can. That's what we're doing. This is where we are. And I wouldn't be able to be completing my education without this opportunity. But often they'll say, I'm very shy in class, and this is where I'm finding my voice. And that's, of course, very gratifying that we're able to provide that opportunity for them. But they don't necessarily understand how everything fits into the big picture. So we try to give them that. I think the other thing that you can do when you get to know your preceptees is steer them to opportunities that are really important, like study abroad. Many students think they can't afford to study abroad. They don't really understand how it works here. year, and having somebody give them a little push to get out of their comfort zone, I think can be really helpful. Or talking about high impact practices with them, so why it's important for them to have an internship, or it's important for them to do capstone projects, or not to take, necessarily the easy way out. I think that they'll really, when you build a relationship, they're really going to look up to you, and you're going to find those pathways for them that they may not necessarily find themselves, because they are busy, and it can sometimes be all-consuming to try to work full-time, go to school full-time, which many of our students do, and be able to get the most out of their education here. But I think when you're building that rapport, it really makes a difference forever with them. Just a little kind of a story that happened from Thomas Edison was there was a student I worked with many years ago who worked at Cisco, and he was looking to he did a liberal studies degree. That's not what he intended to do. He intended to do a degree in technology, but the way his credits worked, he could complete it much, much quicker if he did a liberal studies degree. So I helped him through that, and my husband works at Thomas Edison, and Cisco is their vendor. So he was working with him just the other day, and he said, oh, I loved coming to Thomas Edison, and my advisor was, she did such a nice job. Her name was Susan Davenport, and everybody in the room was like, that's his wife, So, but it was just, here's somebody who I never met, I never saw face to face, but I was able to make an impact that he remembers and takes through his years, as an alum, about why that was a positive experience for him at Thomas Edison. So that was, a really proud moment for me, that I was able, that my husband was able to see that I have an impact for one, and then just that the students still remembered, and that the coincidences of how people are all so connected, and you never know when you're going to hear about a story that you made an impact. You might not make it till years later. Because I think our students really have a hard time seeing while they're doing their coursework how it's more than just it's just more than the 30 courses that they take. I mean, the goal is for it to be more than the sum of their parts, for us to have some kind of culminating experience that you can talk about. And that may not happen when you cross the stage. It may not happen until 5 years later when you start thinking about how the course is all connected together. And that's what we're hoping to help them see through the essential learning outcomes. So I know that you're all familiar with them, so I won't go through them, but Kara has just launched a really nice new addition to the website, and I encourage you to go take a look at it with John Smith's help. And there's, our faculty are doing great research on essential learning outcomes and showing the connections to the degrees, and they really resonate with the students. And we do, in the course, our students read Orphan Train, and we ask them first to talk about the essential learning outcomes in the frame of the book. And that kind of gives a little warm up that they can talk about what they are and how the characters in the book experience the outcomes. And then they create an e-portfolio, and we ask them to talk about where are you in this, in these essential learning outcomes. Are you aware? Are you skilled? Are you competent? Where do you feel you are? And where do you want to be? And that, I think, really helps them put it all together and see that that they can show the value of their education beyond their major, because they're reading everybody's portfolios and commenting on them and seeing how everybody approached things differently, but they're coming to a similar result. And I think it's an easy tool, but very powerful in showing what we're trying to achieve with our education here. Some of the students, very few, are liberal studies majors, but it is a requirement now for the liberal studies degree to take this course. But I think any student can benefit from it. But for the students who are doing a liberal studies degree, they start going through the process of creating a proposal. And so maybe I'll segue over to you for a little bit, and you can talk about what.
Sure. You have received a handout that is very brief in terms of how a student at Stockton could go about pursuing a liberal studies degree or Bachelor of Arts. Although they are school-based, arts and humanities or Sobel, this is a general LIBA degree where the student, him or herself, puts together a program that collectively works in showing a pathway of their goals. So the relevance that Susan was talking about in terms of the education is reflected in how a student maps out his or her liberal studies degree. The first step is to generally work with at least 2 faculty members as sponsors. These people act as guides, and because a lot of students pull from disparate groups of study, sometimes totally not related, it's good to have 2 faculty members, 1 from each area, so they can participate in suggesting, try this, maybe this will work toward your goals. What our office asks of the students is to go to the webpage on the Stockton website that is just a guide for the liberal studies proposal. What you have is a copy of that. And it also makes the student become familiar with the inner workings of how curriculum is developed and the learning outcomes of the school, so that these terms aren't only administrative terms. It's not just some group of people that no one sees making up these ideas, but that the ideas are there for the benefit of the students. Once they become familiar with this and working with the faculty members, they draw up a proposal. There are 3 copies of one that is in its rough draft stages right now. And you'll see that the student has written the rationale behind why she wants to pursue a liberal studies degree rather than just a prescribed, psych degree or social degree or lit degree. And the proposal is formatted very similarly to like a master's proposal or a doctoral proposal. So of course it gets them into the mindset of how curriculum works and that this is something that they themselves are developing. So it becomes very personal. The preliminary, name, Z number, all identification ideas are right up front. And then there's an abstract. What is the rationale behind my pursuing a liberal studies degree? And on the other side, after the proposal, there's the rationale and the detailed study plan. And in the example proposal that's going around, you see after the rationale, this student did a marvelous job. And this is just a rough draft of sitting down and taking into consideration, these are my goals. This is what I would like to do with my education. These are the classes and the programming that I think will factor into those goals. And what you see is a very clear-cut, although it was with a lot of patience, divisions and subdivisions, if you will. This group of classes will address these needs that I foresee I'll need in the future. This group will, address these needs. And she did an extremely, extremely effective job in doing that and still updating these things because she realizes I may only need 5 classes of this, but there are so many other things that I want to do, and this is where the relevance comes in understanding the curriculum. The breadth of classes that are available at any college or university, especially a state college or university, it gets to be overwhelming. So it becomes a practice of how to whittle down what do I want to take, but what is going to be beneficial so that I'm not in school for 10 or 12 years. And once that detailed plan is in place, then the required classes, which are at the bottom of the handout that was given to you, the idea that they have to have at least 12 credits in upper level classes. They have to develop a capstone class with the help of their faculty advisors, and they have to do the Intro to Liberal Studies class, some sort of research class. The Intro to Research would be ideal because it's general and it covers a lot of different bases, but for some students who come to do the proposal later, let's say second semester sophomore, first semester junior year, they may have already taken a research type class somewhere down the line. So that would take the place of the Intro to Research class. And also get involved in some sort of civic or social engagement that they have to plan out over the course of the 4 years that they're going to be at Stockton. And once that is approved, that becomes their degree program. So a CAP or that degree evaluation is built according to their program curriculum development, everything. And then they follow that as a student would follow any other CAP.
So as you have students come to you who seem like they're very directed, but nothing that we have quite fits, this is a really good
Yes.
opportunity for them to take that, be self-directed in how they want to learn and how they want to find meaning in their learning. Sometimes students have a lot of extra credits maybe, or they don't have what they've taken doesn't make a lot of sense, and they may want to try to squeeze things into this. That's not always maybe the best way. I wouldn't say it can't work, but it's not really what this is designed to do. It's more for the student who's saying, you know, I have this goal and this is how I want to reach it. And helping them see that this isn't, you know, this isn't a less than degree because it doesn't have structure. It's actually much more difficult. I mean, I think if any of you have tried to write outcomes, they're tricky. You know, how do you write an outcome? So asking students to write their own degree outcomes, I think, is a pretty tall order, and they rise to that challenge well.
And quite frankly, in the last few months, that the new guidelines have been in place, there have been several students who just thought it was a walk in the park. I just come in and I collect 128 credits and I'll get a liberal studies degree. And when we went over this and they realized there's an investment in this besides sitting in class and doing the class work immediately, they just said, no, that's all right, thank you very much, I'll stick with whatever I was doing. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. Whereas there are students who they key in on this and they, like the rough draft that you see, it just works. And they relish the idea of not a control, but having a direct say in what's going on in terms of what they choose to study and how they choose to study it.
So I think, you know, that was our
Yes.
our formal part of the presentation, but we would love to have, you know, there's not a lot of you here, to continue to have this conversation and open it up to questions.
And by all means, especially after looking at the rough draft proposal, if anybody has any questions.
Just raise your hand if you have a question. Okay.
Thank you. First of all, Susan, if you want to have some preceptees assigned to you, just let me know. You'll have to go through our rigorous training program, because we do things differently than at Thomas Edison State College, but give me the high sign and you're in. Secondly, as you were talking, I thought about the Liberal Studies BA and likening that whole process to the story of one's education. In fact, the word narrative appears prominently in this sheet that you all have. And the difficult part about it is that the curriculum is like the plot of a story. And so if you take one particular plot, like out-of-towner comes to the moors in England and encounters crazy person, if you flesh out that plot in one way, hang certain courses on it, you might say, then you get, what's the one with Heathcliff? That one.
Wuthering Heights.
Yeah. But you take a different series of courses and then you've got Jane Eyre. So what the student has to, the burden for the student pursuing the LIBA is not just to hang in individual courses on a pre-existing tree template plot, but rather they have to invent the plot,
Yes.
a whole new one, and then decide the courses that get put onto that plot. And they do that while they're taking courses. So it's difficult. We put a lot on the student doing the LIBA, and some are daunted by the process and they walk away.
And ideally, it would be nice if the student, especially an undecided student, had an inkling of this, maybe first semester or second semester, but this is not the case most of the time. So this is where the opportunity comes in, where it becomes even more work when you're coming into it as a second semester sophomore, having the preceptor suggests, or a professor suggests this, or someone from academic advising suggests it, and you look into it, it is hard to stop the tracks, rewrite, or edit, revise, and find yourself in a different novel.
But I think those students can really talk their story and know the meaning of their education in a way that not everybody else does. I mean, for the rest of their life, people are going to ask them, what does that mean, that you had a liberal studies degree? And they're going to be able to answer it because they created the meaning.
And the value that it has because it is part of them is is really amazing, especially watching a student react to how thorough that rough draft is, or the one that was finalized on the 15th of September. Someone who is studying international healthcare and worked with a poli-sci professor and a public health professor to come together with a program that addresses all the needs that he foresees himself pursuing on a graduate level.
So where do students get information about this? Should we be doing a better job of getting this information out to them? Or what would faculty do who do not know the first steps in helping them?
Do you want, any faculty who is not aware of it or may be not too knowledgeable in it, because it's just not something that's advertised in a catalog like a psych major or designated major. It's just to get in touch with academic advising. And because it's now housed in the School of General Studies, and academic advising is part of that. And then we can direct the student in terms of, this is what you have to do, and here are some suggestions. The first thing to do is what I suggest the students do is to check the web page for the liberal studies degree. This way they have something in writing and it's tangible. They can always go back to it and say, you know, almost like a checklist, I did this, I did this, I did this, and that gets them much more confident in the beginning stages of the process. And then if the faculty member, like the preceptor, is the go-to person, ideally, but it starts with like the presentations we have in the freshman seminars, undecided preceptors who specialize in those undecided students they have the burden of responsibility too, saying, here's an idea, think about it. That's another first step.
One of the things that we're starting to think about in our precepting symposium group is what sorts of resources we can actually put into the Blackboard advising spaces, and this would be a great addition to.
Yes.
Holding this right. A great addition to that space, right? And that would be a good communicator in addition to the course, in addition to individual preceptors and students who seek it out on their own. It
Yes.
would be there for faculty members who didn't know.
We also might want to have some students do some testimonials. I'm a big fan of testimonials. So talk about their story and how they came to the Libre degree and what the process was like.
I have a number of questions about it because I kind of came to it from a student who did do the degree, and she was very satisfied with the experience. But my questions are: A, do we want to be proactive about this as a benefit, I guess, of being at Stockton and so rich in all kinds of liberal arts courses? And if so, we really should be promoting it more, not just to undecideds, because people, you know, I mean, I'm in the Career Center. People come in all the time. It's like, well, I want to do this with it. And you're thinking, what major? It's not a major. It's something that is overarching. So what is our attitude about it? School.
Well, I'm, obviously very supportive of it, and I do think that we should promote it more and help students have the language so when they go to the Career Center, they understand how it fits into their career goals. So I think that we can be more, what's the right word? More putting it, so that it's not,
Yes.
that's it, so that it's not something that's buried or a hidden secret or, the fine wine that we keep in the back. We want it to be something that's out there for
Yes.
our students as an option.
This
I hope
was
so,
one of
'cause
the
I think
reasons
it's
why
awesome.
our office revamped the process so it is out there, so to speak,
And accessible.
and it's
Yeah.
accessible. That it's not hidden. The student can, even at the suggestion of someone, just go right to the web page and see, here's a process. There's something that it exists.
Okay, and I would suggest, and the Career Center will partner with you if you want to do a workshop about, considering, I don't know how, you have to call it something that would reach out to people, but freshmen and sophomores particularly, about, well, as I said, I don't know what to call it, but we'd come up with something.
Yes.
The other question I have is this kind of self-selecting in that these are fairly self-aware, articulate people who end up going this route? What is your sense of it?
I would say probably, but it's because you had to find it. There's a little bit of a selection bias here. So, I think that there are other students that could benefit perhaps once we're more proactive with the content. And I think a workshop would be a great idea. I love the whole concept of it's more than just a major, trying to get students not to focus so much on their major, but more on the liberal arts and the liberal studies degree as a whole. So I think not just liberal studies majors can benefit that, but all of our students who are receiving a liberal education can have know that employers want students who works in teams, do research, can communicate, critical thinkers. They want students who have our essential learning outcomes. They want them to be able to know their field, but they also this they will call more important our essential learning outcomes. So as much as we can give students that language, I think the better served that they will be.
And it's an ideal process because it maintains the basic foundational ethos of Stockton as a liberal studies college/university. So in that respect, yes, it would benefit us to make it more known, but part of that process is going to happen just by the testimonials, if you will, and the students who are now taking part in this, going out and doing their own preaching, if you will.
One of the downsides of Amoeba, of course, is, one of the downsides is that the student is doing it by themselves with their advisors, so they don't actually have a cohort that's going through the major with them. So, although I think that's fine, and for highly motivated students, it's probably perfectly fine, but for students that are maybe not highly motivated or that might need those support system of a cohort with whom they can talk about these kinds of things. I mean, I think it may not actually work 100%, so that might be something.
But I think you can create your cohort group. So if you're focusing on leadership and communication and marketing, I don't know, so, and that's, then you can create cohort groups within those students who are majoring, and you're going to bring different things to the table that they don't have, and they may have some depth in those areas that you don't have. So I think it's really, it follows that self-directed theme, but I don't think it precludes students from having a home or a sense of belonging.
But they might feel that way. They might feel like, oh, I'm just like a live lover and afraid here at this school, and everybody else has a major. So I think that's something maybe that advising can help with, and precepting can sort of help.
Just in terms of the last year, let's say, I haven't seen that though. The students that come in to inquire about this do not exhibit any of that kind of mindset or anxiety. It's more along the lines of, oh, thank God you understand what I'm talking about. And what's also ironic, I like this too, is the pattern of faculty that are involved with doing this. They keep on, the same names keep on coming up because they are willing to put the time in for something like this. The marketing, communication, and leadership concept, that's quite popular because there is no degree in that per se. So the 2 or 3 students that have already established something like that go out and say, that's how we've gotten the newer ones. Right. And the example one that you have, while it's not a marketing leadership one, this young woman wants to go into some sort of advising and not guidance counseling in the traditional sense like in high school, but wants to go beyond that title. And when I had said to her originally, I said, but there is no major in that. Here is an opportunity. Her one question was, how do I explain it to people? But what I said, and this goes back to the narrative concept, once you have the narrative and the rationale down, that becomes the explanation to people. And the more you do this, the more confident you become and accepting. And in that then makes the cohort, if you will,
I also think it's a way potentially down the road of determining additional degrees that we might want to offer.
Yes.
So if you had, 30 students decide they wanted some kind of marketing, leadership, communication, there's something there that we could then build on.
Yes.
And I'm thinking there are synergies because the one that Bonnie Richmond did was around nutrition and holistic health and those kinds of things. You already did the shopping for the courses that gave her what she needed. So I'm also thinking it would be an easy soft sell to just share some of those topics, because I mean, in student affairs, we're all about trying to promote higher ed as a noble profession. I didn't know this existed, so we could tell someone, hey, if you want to be in higher ed, consider this.
And this morning, Nahil met with me to go over some more, like, what do you think about this?
I knew it was her. She's so good.
And I said to her, look, we're going to do this brown bag today. Do you mind if we use it? And she was just all over that. She was like, of course, because to her, it was advertising, this is the work that I'm doing.
Share those degrees, so people faculty get an idea.
Even as a freshman, she was in my freshman seminar, but even as a freshman, she was amazed that something she was doing in this class was relating to something that had nothing to do, title-wise, with another class. So the fact that she could sit down and benefit from that intro class and see a process materializing is really nice.
And we have been talking a lot about this particular liberal arts degree, but, the majority of our students aren't going to be in that.
No.
So as preceptors, I'd like for us, again, to go back to how do we help all students understand the value of the courses that they're taking and seeing relationships.
Well, I think the first thing is to talk about that we've determined these 10 essential learning outcomes for our students, and that there's a variety of pathways that you can get to achieve them. So you can do them in the classroom, you can do them out of the classroom, and that there's not just one perfect way, one perfect course. All of the courses are going to come together in their own unique way to give you these different essential learning outcomes. I think helping students with that language really is an aha moment for them, and that it's not, that these aren't just extra stuff that we're forcing you to do. There's really a purpose behind them in addition to your major. It's going to make you better in your major if you're a better critical thinker, if you are a better communicator, a better writer, able to do research. I think helping them make those connections is good, and that we have to embrace that too. So I think sometimes we can get really tied to our discipline and think those are really the only important courses towards a degree, but we need to open up and remember that the rest of the credits are important too, and that we can provide valuable insight into them. There are lots of short, interesting articles that I like to pass around on what employers are saying about the value of education. I think those would be helpful to have on our website, and how things like e-portfolios can really help you showcase how you've learned these essential learning outcomes both in your major classes and outside of that. So I think the focus on not so much on program competence, because I think we're not going to forget that. We know program competence is important, but on all of these other essential skills can really help students figure out that this is the pathway I chose. If I had wanted to be trained in a vocation, I might have gone to a different university, but I came to a place that values these things, and this is why.
So back to the BA, I just wanted to get your opinion. The senior who can't pass a required element of their major, who says, I've tried it 3 times, I can't do it. What's your opinion now with this? Is this still an option for them? And is it something we should even suggest, because we come up against them that just can't get past one required course, and we sometimes will say, well, maybe you should think about this. Otherwise, you're not going to get the degree because you just can't seem to meet our major requirements.
I'll go out on a little bit of a limb here. I don't want that student not to graduate. So but I don't think that it should just be the LEBA for people who can't finish the degree. So I think there needs to be a balance. So criminal justice, for example, it has a meaning, it has outcomes, and that maybe we'll just take a stab in the dark. Maybe statistics is what they're having trouble with, and the ability to do well, to be able to think. The outcomes of statistics are important to that major, but maybe they're not important to a LIBA degree that's constructed in a way that has outcomes that are related, similar, some overlap to a criminal justice degree. But maybe it's not just about taking what they have and putting it all together. Maybe they have to take a couple more courses, but it's not statistics. So I would say it shouldn't be a dumping ground, but it shouldn't be precluded as, I don't know if I'm stepping, but it shouldn't be precluded as an option. Because the important thing is we want our students to graduate. If somebody has gotten through 124 credits and they've tried this multiple times and they're just getting discouraged, those are the students I saw at Thomas Edison 10 years later, and it's that's fine. Their lives were fine. They came and they finished their degree later, but I think we have an obligation to them to try to help them find a pathway that gets them to degree completion without at all compromising our degree standards.
We thank you
All right,
for
thank-
presenting today, and we thank you for coming today, and hopefully you'll have a great precepting season, which is just now upon us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.